Hi everybody, welcome to my channel and welcome to Making a Graphic Novel with Alicia Dianne Art. I am your host Alicia Dianne and thank you so much for joining me. So let's go ahead and get started, okay? Awesome. So welcome guys. Welcome everybody from Meetup, from Cartoon Art Center. Welcome everybody watching from Facebook, and welcome to my YouTube viewers. Thank you so much. We've had a lot of new subscribers lately and I really am just really grateful for that. So thank you so much for subscribing. I think I'm close to 200 videos that are up there right now, and I'm going to be streaming, usually I'm streaming weekly, so on Tuesdays, check it out. Stream at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time on Facebook. So at Alicia Dianne Art. Thank you so much again. I'm going to be working with iPad today actually. Usually for these I've been working with watercolor and doing my live streams there. But today I want to do something a little bit different. We want to get into characters, and I'm going to show you a little bit about character development and what I've been doing so far with that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to switch my view. And I am so sorry for like the last time I live streamed, like I had two microphones going at the same time. So that really was not cool. I was so disappointed when I watched it back and I saw, oh no, I had like an echo, but I mean, it happens sometimes. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So I'm streaming directly from my iPad. I'm just going to go into here, and I'm actually going to be creating a new turnaround for my character. My main character, who is Jaydis. This is her, and what I want to do is, I did a turnaround of her some time ago, but it's been a while since I've done like a turnaround, and her design has like, I felt like the turnaround that I initially did never really used, because it just wasn't it just didn't feel like my character. So I want to get into talking about character designs and talking about doing turnarounds. A lot of people don't really like doing turnarounds. It's kind of a necessary thing. For me, I don't really mind it. I think this is the biggest thing, is making sure that I'm happy with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a new file. So just in my Procreate, I'm just going to make a standard screen size file. And I always like to work with, I've been using this pencil a lot lately. And let's see, typically kind of use this brown. So maybe I'll just start with going ahead and making a ground plane. And what's really nice about Procreate is that they have this option to put this grid here, so it's nice when you want to make lines and stuff like that. It really is helpful, and it also is helpful when you're getting into turnarounds. So let's go ahead, gonna like lower the opacity. I just want to kind of have that in mind. But I think for the most part when I'm drawing, I'm going to turn that off, and when I come back, let's see, is there even enough space? Maybe, yeah, I think it might be fine. Alright, so what I want to do is I want to just kind of rough out my character like how I would normally draw her. And I did save, I might even start with a front 3/4. Let's see, I'm gonna, oops, doing on the wrong layer. So let me just rename this to the ground plane, and I'll make a new layer. Alright, and I'll actually lock that so I don't accidentally mess with it. Oh no, I still have a piece of her though. Let's see, unlock, and let's erase. Alright, so hopefully that's all cleared up. Alright. So I think I've changed my character. I've changed her a little bit as time has gone on, but I've kept her to the initial. I think the only thing that's really changed is me just trying to make sure that she was the same character I initially designed. And that wasn't always like easy because I had to figure out how she was going to look. Um, when she had different expressions, I had to figure out how she was going to look doing different things. And it took me a minute to like get her costume too, because I didn't always have like the costume right. I kind of gave her like this generic sort of costume initially, and I was like, I did some more research, and I was like, how can I, make it more unique, or make it more feel more like the character that I'm actually trying to make. So it didn't just happen for me just off the bat. I kind of had to mess around with it a little bit. So I'm gonna just rough her out, and as I go, I'll go ahead and then put her on the floor plane where I want her to be. I think for me initially right now is just making sure that she feels like my character. The last turnaround I did, I hadn't updated, like I was trying out some different things with the costume, and I didn't actually have it how I wanted it. Since the first book even, I've changed her costuming because her costume felt too new, and I wanted to make sure that it felt like lived in, especially since she's been practically an orphan for the last year. So I wanted it to look like her clothes had been a little bit worn down a bit. So maybe I'll even insert a reference for this part, and I'll pull in that image that I just saved. So let's see. So I just pulled this in, and I took off the color because I just really wanted to just focus on the line work at this point, and making sure that that felt like how I wanted it to feel like my character. Let's see. I think it's also really important to fill out your character like a profile for a character, and I did that long before I started even writing. It's like important to understand who this character is, and what I mean by that is like what their quirks are, the different aspects of their personality. She's like a very like sort of diamondy shaped nose. She has a mole here. But when you find these online, and I think I have like a template for it too, so maybe I'll just attach one of those to the maybe I'll attach one of those, a link. But you can also just Google search like a character profile, and it will tell you different things like their likes, their dislikes, how many siblings they have, how old they are. When you start to find more detailed ones, it'll even go into like height, weight, hidden fears they might have. So it can get really detailed, and I think it's important, even if like a lot of that information is like something that you may never really share with your viewer or your reader. I think it's important to really know your character inside and out, especially the protagonist. So this is a protagonist of my comic series Jaydis story, and her name is Jaydi. Jaydi Asha. And I think that you really want to know why, because that is what helps you to respond, helps you to allow your character to respond to different circumstances and situations in a way that feels believable. Because your character, especially your main character, is going to go through stuff. And the better the story probably means that they're going to have to go through a lot more challenging things. I think. I think that every protagonist has to go on some sort of a character arc, right? So if they're going to be going on a character arc, then they're going to need to face some challenges. And if you're going to have them face challenges, then it's important to know who they are, so you'll know how they'll respond. Knowing who they are, who you're starting with, and however they grow in the story, that's really going to be up to you and up to what you choose. Okay, so I have my character here. This feels like her, even though it's a very rough still. And I think I'll go ahead and even, I'm trying to think if I should even like clean it up before I start the next one. I'm thinking maybe I'll at least begin that process so it feels natural for me. Like it feels like I can really see who this initial sketch of her is. But it does feel like her, and that's really what I wanted to do, because the last sort of turnaround, I think too, I started with the front view, which I think it is kind of standard to start with the front view for a lot of artists, but I think for me it feels more natural to start with the front 3/4 view. And and the first drawing that you make of your character is really important, because you're basing all the rest of the turns on that first drawing. So you want to make sure that you get it right. And I think I really made an error before when the first one didn't really feel right, but you keep going, and that felt like a mistake. And something that I had to learn from. Like, if you don't have that first image of your turnaround right, then you gotta start again until it does feel right, because then it's just never gonna feel like your character, and you won't even use it. And what's the point of having a model sheet or like a turnaround if you're not gonna use it? The whole point is so that you can. And hopefully even like you might think by yourself, if you're doing this, then what's the point of having even like one of these? I mean, you can kind of work around it and not have it, but I think especially if you're doing something that's continuous and you want to perhaps eventually send off to other artists to help you work, it's good to have these so that you'll be able to do that sort of thing. The whole idea is that your character is going to be staying consistent throughout, and that your character is going to be staying consistent throughout the whole series. I'm going to move this ground plane down a little bit. So let's unlock this, and let's turn that graph back on. So let's see if I can bring this down. Maybe I'll just bring it to here and pull her up a little bit. Or should I bring it down to there? I think I can probably work with it on this plane. And it took me the longest time to figure out, because I was so confused where their feet are supposed to go on the ground plane. And I really didn't, I was like, oh, where do they go? Because it's hard when you do it like this, or if you put it like their toe, then it doesn't really work for the full, or even if you try like in the middle, then it seems like at some point it gets weird. But what I learned is that it always goes on the heel of the furthest back foot. The heel of the furthest back foot. And that is going to help you to stay consistent throughout the whole thing. And when I figured that out, it just it made the whole process a whole lot easier. Yeah, it really did, because I was really unsure for a minute. All right, so let's go ahead and let's just clean her up a little bit. Even though we just have this first angle, I still want to kind of clean her up a little bit. And I've gone kind of back and forth with which pen I used for the cleanup. Sometimes I'll use like my really smooth ink pen, but I've also liked using the pencil. I'm gonna try it out with this one. It feels like a pencil brush, but it has like the thickness and thinness, so like the, what is it called, the pressure sensitivity. So let me try it with this one and see how I like this. It's a little too thin. Let me make sure I'm on a new layer. Okay, this might work. Let's see. I'm trying to find like the right amount of thickness. And her eye is really in this eye anyway is in the rough area, so I'm gonna have to try and figure out. I might need to move some things around just a little bit. Let's see. With characters, I think the more you know about your character, the better. I mean, even if it's a small one, I do think that even when you're making animal designs, I went through a whole thing with animal designs, and I think I might have mentioned this before, but her little sidekick, her little pet, is a goat, and I went through this whole process of researching goats and figuring out which one would be like the right look. And I initially started with one type of goat, but then realized that they were gigantic, and so I had to change and find a different species because that was just not the idea I had in my mind. And I did some more research on different types of goats. I looked at the Nigerian dwarf goat, and looked at what was that other one called that I was really like seriously considering. It was like a Nubian goat, and I was looking at these different ones, and I was like, oh, I couldn't find one that felt right. And then finally I discovered the Boer goat. Hopefully I say that right. It's Boer. And I was like, okay, this one I think is going to be the right one. So that's what I've settled on for now. But for your protagonist, what would I say is really important? I think getting that person, people have to really feel for your protagonist. They need to like your protagonist. And also your protagonist can't be like, or maybe I shouldn't say can't, because I mean you can do whatever you want, but they should really kind of feel like they're learning something, or like they're teachable, you know? So in that sense, they shouldn't be like, you really don't make protagonists too goofy or too just like out there, or, you know, it's somebody that in a traditional type of storytelling, you want them to be teachable. Because at some point, if you have a character arc, you're going to want them to grow. And a character arc just means that your character is going to grow through the story. I don't mean physically grow like Alice, but you want them to kind of learn some sort of a lesson, or you want them to kind of discover something, maybe even about themselves that they didn't know. Like you want them to have that sort of development. Her face is kind of like heart-shaped. This is not an unusual expression of hers. I think it's really important to know the people. I went through so many different types of people, and even after I knew what the character was, I still felt like I needed to put in like some studies to like make sure that I wouldn't be able to just draw her once, but be able to draw her over and over again, how I wanted to. So I did a lot of like looking even at the age group. She's 12, and she goes into 13. So I'm like, all right, what does even a 12-year-old look like? They're kind of grown, but not really yet. And you got to think too, like a 12-year-old who's gone through puberty doesn't look the same as a 12-year-old who hasn't. She has, and I know that about my character. And because it's important, I need to know like her stage of development or her sense of like maturity. That changes. So I mean, stuff that you might not even think about, you kind of have to, especially if you're at an age where it does make a difference to the character, who they are and how they act, how they respond. I wanted her to have sort of a sense of maturity because of also her life experience, like what she's gone through. So that's also something to take into consideration. If your character has really had it easy their whole life, they're not going to act in the same ways as someone who has been through different challenges, especially if those are like traumatic experiences. All right. Also, one of the things that you might not think about is, all right, so I had to figure out how I wanted her clothes to be, and that now that I decided that I'm going to like age her clothes. So I decided that I would do like some tears in her t-shirt, like she'll have some tears, and then the edges are going to be like not smooth, but they'll have like more just like kind of like used, like aged. And a character that I've discovered that had that look that I wanted to was the character Anne Marie from All Dogs Go to Heaven. And so I did some research on that and just kind of looked at how they did her clothes. And she was an orphan character as well, and she obviously didn't have like the new clothes or anything, so her clothes they used like a bit of a tattered look on the fabric. So that was just one thing I had to figure out. You also want to think about like what's their function, what are they doing daily. That's going to contribute to what they wear, what family background they come from. I have this I have my character, and she's wearing what are they called? I forget the name immediately. It's a kanga. It's like, the word is kanga, and they do have different words in different regions. My character is Kenyan, but in the story, it's a fictional town. It's a fictional country and a fictional town, but it's basically, it's based off of Kenya. So she's a Kenyan character, and so it's a fabric. It's a wax printed fabric that is really popular in the region, and they're pretty popular like in several different countries in Africa, but they're called a kanga in Kenya. So I looked up different patterns, and I learned a lot because the different patterns actually mean different things. So it was just like how can you say it? It was just a fun process to just realize that, all the little intricacies that can go in when you're starting to research your character. But it was a cool process for me to figure out. But for her, it's passed down. So if you notice, like if you look in the flashback scene in the first issue, it's the same kanga that she's wearing with her mother, that her mother is wearing when they go to that it's like a very secret, like worship ceremony. Like her mother is a believer in this Western religion, and she goes with her, and her mother is wearing this kanga when they go. Later on, though, and like when we catch up, then we see that Jaydis is now wearing this kanga that her mother used to wear. Alright. So what it is just a big piece of fabric. So she wears it like a dress because she wraps it around and ties it around her neck. But really it's a big piece of fabric. And they all sort of have like a main pattern, and then they have this border, and then there's like a second pattern that goes beneath the border. And then underneath she wears jeans, and she has her t-shirt as well. Alright, so I'm gonna be doing the rest of the turn pretty rough. I just want to rough in like where everything's gonna be going, and then I can clean it up. But right now I just want to figure out, let me get that first one right. And I think that's really important when you start your turnaround. Try and get that first one feeling right. And you don't want to have your character doing any sort of too much action or motion. They should be pretty stagnant. Ideally, they're really in a very straight pose like this. There's her big arms. But I have her a little bit leaning on the hip, and I'm okay with that. Like, so she might be a little bit leaning on the hip, and then her arms will just be straight. So that's fine. I always stand like that myself. Like, I can never really stand completely straight. The whole idea of them standing straight is just that so it makes it easier when you're doing the different angles. So keep them standing pretty straight, but it doesn't have to be completely straight. Some people even just do their turnarounds with like a T pose, but those like CG type poses where the character has their arms straight out, but for me it feels like it doesn't have any life in it. So I can't even look at characters like that. I can't personally. I need to see some life in my character. I mean, I get it, like how the way that a 3D artist thinks is very different and much more technical than a traditional, from what I see. But for me, yeah, I definitely need to see my character, like they need to look like they're alive for me to believe it and feel it. And I think that the first person who has to feel it is you. You're creating this, so you need to make it feel real. It should feel real. Let's see how it looks just like that without the little borders. Okay, I mean, it feels like my character. It's her right height and everything. She's got little sandals. So this is my character. All right, so let's go ahead and start roughing out the rest. And for the rest, I will need my drawing guide because I'm going to need to see. And ideally, you can even have another layer where you're kind of, oops, place marking where things are going. So let's see. Like you can place mark if it doesn't line exactly. Or you know what you can do? One of the things that I kind of like to do, oops, if it doesn't completely line up, you can go ahead and, let's see, let's move this where her head ends, right about there. Her hair goes up higher, but I think I want to have where her head ends rather than her hair. And let's see, some other markers you can have are like where the shoulders are. So let's see if I need another line. And I can just go ahead and select that and move it. So I would put it like right in the middle. Since she's at a 3/4, I would put it like right in the middle there. And let's see, I think I can turn off my reference now. All right. And let's see. I wonder if I made her arms too long. No, I think they're okay. Alright, so what if I put another one? I want to make them nice and even. That's why I'm drawing them on the graph, but then I move them to fit where I need them to be. So let's see. The hip is like right there. You can always also like put one where her waist is and all those other types of markers that will indicate where things are going. You can even do this for the face too, and a lot of I think the face is one of like the most important parts too, and like the knees. Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and rough in where I want her body before I add in her face in other areas. Alright, so you can put those in, kind of slot that, and let's just kind of rough in. Another color, I like to use light blue too when I'm trying to figure the stuff out. So maybe I'll use that. Let's see. I'm going to go back to my 6B. So it's a little bit thicker. Oh, the chin as well. So that chin is like, it's right on the line too. Let's see. I don't want to rough out where I want to put everything. And ideally, you also want to make sure that your character is even from top to bottom. So I will do a check once I'm done. Let's see. Let's go ahead and go back to this. Actually, let's make a new one. So let's see, I'm gonna grab that. And put a line straight down. And let's just make sure that our character is even on both sides. Maybe I'll just angle it. Let's see, how does this feel? Her legs are not completely, so let's move them a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and grab blue color, and I'll just keep just tweaking it just a little bit. I do draw this character, you know, a bit, but if it was earlier in the process, like before, let's say before I started the process, then I think it's good to just kind of dabble and just do like doodles of your character to really understand them first. You just don't automatically get them, especially in doing different angles and expressions and all of that. I think it's important to just kind of play around at first to really just understand them. Even if you need to feel like you need to do some thumbnails of a storyboard to kind of understand your character, and then go ahead and make sure that you do a turnaround at some point. Preferably before you start your graphic novel. The earlier versions is just for me, and you need to, if you need to redo them, then that's just what you need to do. I just have, you know, especially if you've been working with your character for a long time, they might have some changes. I think most major characters have changed and tweaked and been altered to a different extent. I mean, look how much Mickey Mouse has changed over the years. If you look at like some of the first ones compared to now, he's changed like 3-4 times at least. SpongeBob has changed since the initial season. It's actually kind of creepy looking, I think, in the first season. Then they got it together eventually, but they didn't at first. And I do kind of have her where she's just straight. I don't have her like on her hip in this pose. I really just want to, you know, figure her out, understand her. Where everything's going to be placed. Her hair is kind of diamond shaped. So I fill it in. It's obviously not that, but the initial is going to be something along those lines. Alright, so let's see, how many other poses am I going to make? I'm going to make a profile pose, so maybe I'll just leave her like that in that pose for now. And I am on the same layer, so maybe I'll add that to the second layer. So I'll erase this. Oops. And I'll just start this one over here. Okay, so let's see. It's important to know your character's head shape. And your characters should have pretty different head shapes. You don't want them to all have the same head shape because our heads are so different and you can really recognize somebody by their head. If you didn't notice, you don't initially draw those clothes when you're first putting your character in. You just want to have an outline of the form. It's almost like you're making them as a mannequin. You know, they don't really have like, you're not drawing in like the body parts necessarily, like anything that's not really showing. You just want to know where everything is going to be. And it's really hard to figure out how the clothes fall if you don't know where the different body parts are. And I might need to lift her foot up because if her heel is going to be ending there, then her foot should be a little bit higher up. I had the strangest dream last night. I dreamt, and I don't know if anyone else ever has this experience, but I dream a lot about my childhood home, and I don't know why. I keep having dreams about it, and like I had a dream about like the dogs I had when I was like a teenager. And this has nothing to do with character design, but I'm just wondering if like what is the meaning. I do feel like dreams have meanings, and I feel like especially if you have recurring dreams, then I feel like it's something that you're supposed to get from it. And I don't know what the idea behind like constantly dreaming about your childhood home, what that means. Because I feel like I dream about the home that I lived in for like it feels like at least once a week or something. And I think it's kind of strange. Or not strange in the sense, it's just something is going on. Like, why am I keep having that dream? And before I get into making her face, I do want to point out at this point that you want to know where the different things on the face are. So if she's turning around, then her nose should be kind of centered here. Her mouth. It's like a balance between making sure that everything is organized across the board, but also making sure that you're staying true to your character's design and what that character looks like from different angles. Oops. Let's see. Her ears too are kind of like pyramid shape a little bit. But here, it also kind of has like a diamond shape from the back too, but not too much, just a little bit. Alright. So rough that in and kind of rough in where I want. Let's see. I don't think her heel is that high. So let me make it more. Around there. I used to always mess up the feet on a turnaround, and it would just frustrate me so much. Because they always made the ankle like too much. Like they would be flat from the front, and then as soon as I got to the side, they'd be like on their tippy toes, and it would just frustrate me. I didn't understand why. It's because I couldn't figure out where to put them. So where clothes are going. I put a little bit more detail in this one than the second one, just because I want you to understand like what else I'm adding to it as we go around. And I'm eyeballing some of these things, but it's always nice to check before you do your final like cleanup, like before you add your inking, that everything is where it's supposed to be. Oops. That things are the same, are falling in the same place on the body. Like where that little ribbon is, or that little bar is separating into two different patterns, I want to make sure that it's falling on her, the same part of her leg all the way around. Like it's just right above the knee. So I want to make sure that I have that pretty accurate all the way around, so that it's not shifting. It becomes really important too when you're doing animation, even more than comics, because when you're doing animation, it starts to become really obvious when things start moving and shifting around and it's not being consistent. That's when you really will know, like, okay, this is not working out right. All right, so let's see if we can do another angle. Now we have this. I think the back 3/4 would be the next most important part to do. So let's see. I might actually just move this one over here. And I might need to make her, I think her feet are a little bit bigger. Alright, well, I'll figure that out. It's okay that it's rough right now, but perhaps let's do a nice rough of the back 3/4. So I like to do, like, whenever I'm doing the head, you make sure that you put in that base of the skull, right? The rest is like the jaw. It's like the main part of your skull, and then there's like the jaw that's added, so you have like a bone, right? And this will be kind of goes like that, you know. That's kind of like how I like to think of it. I know it feels a little bit morbid just to like have this awareness of the skeleton and where the muscles are falling, but it's really important to have your character be believable, that you kind of get that part, you know. You need to really get it. At least know where things are falling. And I'll talk a bit too, I think, on picking colors for your character. Well, perhaps we can get to that next week, because I think that's an important part of the character design as well. It's just understanding the colors that are happening in your story, whether it's a comic or whether it's an animation or even a game. If you're designing games, all of the above, it matters to know, like, what colors are going to be going together. Is your character going to be standing next to another character a lot in your story? If that's the case, you want to make sure that you have their colors be somewhat complementary to each other, so that they look good on the screen or on the paper together. It's something you don't necessarily think of when you're in the very beginning of parts of it, but after you get on and you pass the writing stage and you're like deep into the designing stage, then you're going to start thinking about those types of things. And it's funny too with this age, it's like I want to kind of sometimes, like, my instinct is to make her taller, but I also realize she's not fully grown yet. And and that was one of the things I learned, like sketching, like, that age group, is this understanding that, they're not, their proportions are not the same as someone in their 20s, and kind of adapting the design to fit the age group. They're not the same proportion as an 8-year-old, but they're changing. It's not the same as they would be when they're finished growing. I'm just trying to keep that in mind as you go. Here, what's happening with that? One of the things I had to realize too early on, like, as I started, like, doing the final lines in the second book, is just kind of realizing which side of her shirt the tear was on, and I had to put that on my desk so that I could keep that in mind, because she only has I didn't want to overdo it, so I just gave her a tear on that one there on one side of her shirt. So I had to, like, leave a note for myself so I would remember which side it was on. Just little details like that. You have to just keep that in mind so that you can remember for yourself. Because everybody's not going to notice it, but some people will. And you want to make sure that your design, you're putting in the work for your design, so that it's consistent throughout. I'm going to go back to this one here. Put in where I have her jeans and all that. Maybe just a little bit. We're kind of like in the middle here. Maybe I'll just plug in quickly where her facial details are. The nose is just kind of right here. wanted to give her big, like, impressionable eyes. Kind of just shows her, like, vulnerability. One thing that I don't really like is sometimes when I see people and they're doing like ethnic characters and they just make all of them with very, very small eyes. And I don't think that that's an accurate depiction. A lot of different people have like big, bright eyes. And when you see like certain like famous characters with big, bright eyes, nobody's eyes really look like that, but you know, of no culture. But I think eyes can be big on any ethnicity. It doesn't have to be like one or the other, and they don't. Every like person's ethnicity from a particular background, if they're from a minority, you don't have to always have like small little eyes or like slanted eyes. I don't have slanted eyes, and I'm a minority. If you didn't notice. So I will work on finishing these up. I'll probably post it on Instagram when I'm finished completely, like with this turnaround, just so you guys can see like the whole thing, and hopefully it makes sense. Just have like some distinguishing things. Not saying to neglect like any part of like studying like different things from different cultures and what different people have, but don't feel limited or feel like everybody from any minority has to have this one thing or whatever, because there's so much variety, especially when we have so many people that have mixed genes. I think most of us do. So just don't feel too limited or feel like if you're doing a minority then you have to do it, there's only one way, because it's not. There's so many ways, and I have lots of different looking people, different complexions and different features in this book, and I would encourage you to also do the same sort of thing in your own stories. Have minorities, but also like have fun in the designs. They don't have to look like everybody else in that culture, or all of your characters don't have to look the same because they're from the same like country or region or whatever. It can have variety, and I think they should. And that is it for that. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me. It was fun today. I really was wanting to do this and have like a really like updated model sheet of an updated turnaround of Jaydis, because she's such a obviously important character for my story. So hopefully I gave you some tips and some insights of how to make your character turnarounds and how to kind of get started in your character design in depth, and really just thinking more about how you want to do your characters and have like those drawings and illustrations ready for when you're telling like an intense story, or even just a story that you want to keep going at any length. So hopefully this is helpful, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys being here and watching me, and it was a really good time. So I will see you all next week, but until then, be grateful, live balanced, be yourself. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.